Okay, so we're in Parsha Emor, which is in Vayikra. The next Parsha coming up here, Parsha Emor. Um, chapter 21 of Vayikra, Leviticus chapter 21, and Emor. We come to this. I was studying and I came across some interesting things about the number 70. Okay. And 70, we see that the number 70 has to do is a big secret. And we see that 70 has to do with almost like distancing from Hashem. It comes from separating, almost destruction. And we have some hints in the Torah about 70. And it's alluded with Haman. And if we go to Bereshit chapter 1, we see that Hashem creates everything, and Adam is made, and we see the fall of Adam. We see the sin that Adam does. And if we actually count from verse 1 in Bereshit, 70 Pesukim, 70 verses later, we actually come to the fall. In Genesis chapter 3, we see it says in verse 14, and Hashem God said to the serpent, because you have done this, accursed are you beyond all the cattle and beyond all beasts of the field. So here, 70 verses later, we see that the serpent is cursed, and all the beasts in the field. This is the fall. This is the first time the distance of Hashem happens. Right here, 70 verses later, exactly 70 verses. You can go back and count. And we also see that Adam could eat from all the trees in the garden except for one. And Adam, he chose to bow down that tree, the Eitz Hadas, right? He bowed down to that tree. And that tree is alluded to with Haman. If we look in Pasuk Yud Aleph, verse 11, it says, Vayomer es kol lecha, shamati bagan va'ira, ki e rom anochi ve'ehave. And he said, who told you that you were naked and you have eaten? Or in verse 10, it says, he said, I heard the sound of you in the garden. I was afraid because I am naked, so I hid. Verse 11, it says, and he said, who told you that you were naked? Have you eaten of the tree from which I command you to eat? And it says, Vayomer es kolecha shamati bagan ve'ira ki erim Anochi ve'ahave. Vayomer mi higid lecha ki erom ata amin ha'etz. So we see Haman. We see Haman, the letters of Haman from the book of Esther, is alluded to here with the serpent. Okay, and the sages say that the serpent's head was cursed, and so was his tail. And what was the tail? The tail was Haman. This alludes to Haman from the book of Esther. And Adam bowed down to Haman, that tree. Okay, and Haman had everyone bow down to him, but he wanted Mordecai. Haman wanted Mordecai to bow down
Go on
to.
potty.
Yeah.
There you go, potty. Just go potty.
Yeah, someone needs to be muted. Okay, and so we see that Haman wanted Mordecai to bow down to him. He had everyone else bowing down to him, but not Mordecai. Mordecai doesn't bow. And there's a word in Hebrew called af. Af can mean anger. It can also mean also. Okay. And we see that 4 people were cursed with af with 70. 4 people were wiped out with af. One is the snake. If you go to Genesis 3:1, it says, Af ki amar Elohim. Did God perhaps say? So the serpent uses the word af and he's deceiving the woman, and he says, perhaps, or also, did he also say this? Right? So we see the word af. And we see also in Bereshit 40 verse 16, where Joseph is interpreting the dreams with the baker and the cupbearer, and I think it's the baker who really doesn't put his trust in Joseph. He says, I don't care what you interpret, this and that. But Joseph goes on and interprets the dream of the cupbearer in chapter 40 verse 16. 40 verse 16. And it says Vayar Sar Ha'ofin Ki Tov Kasar Vayomer El Yosef Afani. And now it says, the chamberlain of the baker saw that he interpreted well. So he said to Joseph, I too, in my dream. So then he's all of a sudden seeing, he goes back on his word and says to Joseph, oh, I had a dream too. Now he wants to interpret, but he didn't really speak too well of Joseph in the beginning. And then we have also Korach in Numbers 16, Bamidbar 16. We see Korach rise against Moshe Rabbeinu. And in verse 14, he says, so Korach challenges Moshe, goes against Moshe, and it says, Af lo el eretz. Moreover, you did not bring us to the land flowing with milk and honey. So Korach is almost like putting down Moshe and even going against Hashem's own words. And so it says Af again. And we see it the 4th time with Haman. Haman in the book of Esther, the Megillah Esther, in chapter 5, verse 12. And it says, Vayomer Haman af lo he'ivi'ah. Haman said, moreover, Queen Esther invited no one but myself to accompany the king. So this is all about the 70. The 70th day will nullify Haman. Why 70 and then the curse? Why did it be 70 verses and then a curse? And 9 means eyes. We talked about this the other day. Eyes is equal with 70. And there's a message here that when we follow with our eyes, it leads to destruction. When Kava looked at the tree, she saw that it was beautiful. She saw that it was beautiful, and she was led with her eyes, which leads to destruction. They say the eyes are the windows of the soul. I mean, when you look at things, and especially when you're not supposed to be looking at certain things, it destroys you. Okay. And Chava fell because she looked at the tree and it was beautiful. And death came into the world. Ain 70. The snake had Chava deceived with her eyes, and she will end. So the serpent, the Nachash, will be punished with Ain, with 70. And how long was Adam supposed to live for? Does anybody know how long Adam was supposed to live for?
1,000 years.
1,000 years. That's right. But because of the fall, because of the eyes and Chava looking with her eyes, man's years reduced to 70. It says in Psalms 90 verse 10 that man's life is to 70 years. And so Adam was missing 70 years of his life, 930 years. And you see, we take our eyes, if our eyes are looking in the wrong direction, it leads to destruction. We have to keep focused. We have to keep focused with our eyes. We have to focus on Hashem. And this is even like in the Gospels, in the Brit Hadashah, in Matthew 14. We see that Mashiach is walking on the water. And verse 28, and Kepha answered him and said, he said, Lord, if it be you, bid me come unto the water. And he said, come. And when Peter was come down out of the ship, he walked on the water to go to Yeshua. But when he saw the wind boisterous, he was afraid and began to sink and cried, saying, Lord, save me. You see, this is very common. We learn from like little kids if we've been studying for that long and with the New Testament and these things. But the thing was, Peter took his eyes off of the goal, off of Mashiach, off of Torah, and this caused him to sink. And 70 is alluded with Purim and Haman. And what do we do on Purim? What's one major thing that we all do, especially what I like to do? we like to drink wine. And wine is yain, which is also the numerical value of 70. And they say when you drink, the more the wine goes in, the more secrets come out. And secrets is sod, which also equals the numerical value of 70. So why 70 and what does it have to do with Purim? Haman followed his eye. How did he follow his eye? He saw Mordecai. He saw Mordecai was the only one not bowing down to him. Hashem said to Adam, you can eat from all the trees except for this one. You see, everybody was bowing down to Haman, but he had his eye on Mordecai. He had all the trees bowing down to him, but he wanted that tree. And Mordecai said no. And you see, we have also in Torah, we have these rest days. We have these holy days, happy days in Torah. And there's actually 70 happy days throughout the year in Torah. And we have 8 days of Sukkot. We have 7 days of Pesach. That's 15. 1 day of Shavuot, according to the biblical Torah, and 1 day of Rosh Hashanah, and 1 day of Yom Kippur. That's 18. And we have 52 days of Shabbatot, 50 days of rest of Shabbat. 52 plus 18 is 70. So we have 70 days of rest in a year. And that 70 is a secret to undo the power of Haman. We have the power to undo Haman, to undo his power. 70 days later, you see, it says in the book of Esther, Megillah Esther, in chapter 3, it says, after these things, King Ashkaveris promoted Haman, the son of Hammedatha the Agagite, and advanced him. So here we see Achashverosh, he promotes Haman, and 70 days later, Haman was hung. 70 days later, Haman was hung. And we see that in Esther 3, chapter 3, verse 2, it says, all the king's servants at the king's gate would bow down and prostrate themselves before Haman. And this is what the king had commanded concerning him. It says, Le Haman, he came, Ziva. This is the command concerning him. He came. Cain is Kaf Nun, which is the numerical value of 70. So Kaf is 20, Nun is 50. And 70 is alluded to bowing down. 70 days, Hashem, in 70 days, Hashem will take care of him. This is where he gets promoted. And 70 days later, Hashem says, I will take care of him. And also, Haman, if we go to chapter 1 and verse 16, we see that Haman's name is also Memukan. Memukan, Khan. It means he will be here, Khan. He will be here for 70. Khan is Kaf Nun, 70. Is he will be here for 70. And Esther made a second day party. She made 2 days, a second day party, and Mordecai was the head of the 70 elders. He was the leader of the Sanhedrin, 70 elders. Again, 70. The first party was 69 days. It was at the 69 days. The second was 70 days, and Esther knew all of this. And in Esther 4:15, how long did Esther fast for? Her and Mordecai fast. In chapter 4, verse 15, it says, then Esther said to reply to Mordecai, go assemble all the Jews found in Shushan and fast for me. Do not eat or drink for 3 days, night or day. And you know, what is 3 days in hours? 72. But the sages say that she actually fasted for 70 hours. 70 hours. Because she knew the Nachash, the snake, has power from the Ain, from the 70. And so what does this got to do with Parsha Emor? Well, it has everything to do with Parsha Emor. Okay, so Parsha Emor, we also have the 70 count. Okay, we have also, when you count back, I forgot to mention, when you count back in the book of Esther to when he's hung. It's also 70 verses. When he was promoted to when he was hung, 70 verses, which is amazing. And in Parsha Emor, we see the sages also say, when you start in chapter 1 of Parsha Emor, chapter 21, Vayikra, Vayomer Hashem el Moshe Emor, it says, when you count these verses and you get down, you count 70, you come to Omer, the Omer count. Literally, you come to chapter 23, 70 verses later, with the Omer count. But it's actually 3 verses short. But as you read through the Omer count in chapter 23 up to verse 15, you will see again about the counting of the Omer. And what about these 3 missing verses? Well, if you look from verse 16, it says, Ad mimakrat hashabbat, until the morrow of the 7th week you shall count. But if you look at the 3 previous verses, if you look at the very last letter of verse 15, it's me shovotechem. It's got a mem sofit. The last letter of verse 15 is a mem. You go to verse 14, the very last letter, it says a quarter hin, hahim. The last letter is a nun sofit. And if you look at the last verse of 15, so 15, 14, and 13. 13 is hahim. You see in verse 13, the last letter is a nun. The last letter of verse 14 is a mem sofit. And the last letter of verse 15, ti, hinya, is a hey, which spells the letters Haman. It spells Haman. And so you have Haman, chapter 23. So what does Haman have to do with the Omer? And when did Haman die? The rabbis say we count on the day we count the Omer. This is when Haman died, on the day we started counting the Omer. On the 3 days that Mordecai and Esther fasted, that was the beginning of Pesach. That was Pesach. And the Seder, they did not do the Seder, they were fasting. The second day, this is why Esther was prepared a second day. The second day of Pesach, Haman got killed, and that was the day that we start counting the Omer. One of the reasons why we hide 10 pieces of chametz during Pesach, before Pesach begins, we hide the 10 pieces of chametz, is because it's 10 negative powers. And the sages associate this with the 10 negative powers that Haman's sons had. And which goes against, these powers go against the Jewish nation, go against the Jewish people all the time. And so what we're doing is we're undoing that negative power. And that night was the beginning of the destruction of Haman. We also see that 3 angels in Bereshis come to visit Abraham. And they came to bless him, to heal him. And 1 angel goes to destroy the cities Sodom and Gomorrah, right? And when did those 3 angels come to visit Abraham? The rabbis say it was Pesach. And the next day, the angels go to Lot, and Lot gives them matzah. And so when they came to Abraham, they stayed Pesach night. And the next day they went to Lot. And the next day was the 16th of Nisan. And what did they do? They destroyed Sodom and Gomorrah. And why on this time? Sodom and Gomorrah, when you rearrange the letters of Amorah, it spells Ha'omer. It spells Ha'omer. And this is Sephirah Ha'omer, They destroyed it on the counting of the Omer. And we see also that when Yaakov, we go even another place in Bereshit, we see Yaakov goes to greet Esau with his 400 men, and he bowed 7 times down to Esau. And even though he lured the power of through the power of Haman through Esau, some of the rabbis say it was a little bit like Chilul Hashem. Wasn't so great. The Zaddik bows down to the Rasha. And so the sages say that Yaakov did teshuvah, and Yaakov comes back to this world as Mordecai. He comes back as Mordecai, and Esau comes back as Haman. And so Haman says, you gave me this power, then bow down to me. He tells Mordecai, bow down to me. And we see that Yaakov, he does this teshuvah. We see in Bereshit chapter 32, verse 12. 32, verse 12. And it says, Hatzileni na miyad, achi miyad. Rescue me, please, from the hand of my brother, from the hand of Esau. And when it says, Hatzileni na miyad, rescue me, the initial letters of these 3 words, He, Nun, and Mem, spell Haman. And so Yaakov is saying, save me from my brother and my descendants from Haman. Because Haman is actually comes through Esau's line. And so, the Omer count, some people say it's not that big of a deal, or maybe we think it's not that big of a deal. But the Omer count is super big deal. It is a big mitzvah. And we got to understand what we're doing, because we're destroying the powers of Haman. It's not so simple. It's a big mitzvah. And we got Eretz Israel because of the Omer. Hashem told Abraham, I will give you the land if you bring Korban Omer. And we also see that what is the Omer all about? What is the Omer offering? It's barley food. It's made for animals, because it shows us that we can sometimes be like animals in the flesh, in the nephesh, but we have to bring to Hashem every day and try to get rid of this animalistic nature within us and ascend and get rid of that. And also, even in the Sota, in the Parsha about the jealous husband over a woman that could have possibly have cheated on him or done adultery, what does she have to present? She has to bring barley. And why barley? Barley also brings shalom bayis. It brings peace. It brings peace. And so this is the secret of the 70. We are actually destroying the forces of the impurity. And by counting 70, we are actually doing tikkun, we are doing rectification, and we are also bringing the holy side. What's interesting also is we know a lot about the Ain, the missing Ain. We know about Mashiach, Yeshua, and he's also known as Yeshu, missing the Ain. And like I've said before, the Balhal Turim notes an interesting gematria on the name of Esav. Esav is the gematria 376, which is equal to that of shalom, peace. And where Esau's name's not identified with peace, he would have destroyed the world. This is what the Bel HaTurim says. How can Esau's name be associated with peace? He's a person of war. And our Menachem Mendel of quotes says that the truth is not necessary as things appear. As Hashem told Shmuel the prophet, Hashem sees not as man sees. For man looks on the outward appearance, but Hashem looks at the heart. And that's in 1 Samuel 16:7. And we see in our Parsha, the one who appears as Esau is actually Yaakov in Parsha Toldot. And the Mashiach is hidden and cloaked in Christianity, but is not actually Esau. And his name is peace, as Isaiah says, Isaiah 9:6. Okay. And R. Yosef, the Galilean, comments, R. Yosef, the Galilean said, the name of the Mashiach is peace, for it is said, everlasting Father, Prince of Peace, Isaiah 9:5. R. Yosef, the Galilean said, great is peace, for in that hour in which King Mashiach is revealed to Israel, he begins with peace. For it is said, how beautiful upon the mountains are the feet of messenger of good tidings, who announces peace, Isaiah 52:7. This quoted in Messiah text. The Bel HaTurim also notes that the Ayin is equivalent to 70, linking to the 70 nations. And today in Yeshua, like I said, is known as Yeshu. The Ayin of his name is missing, as the 70 nations led by Rome have concealed the Ayin of Yeshua's name. And this is evident in Bereshit 25:26. The Ayin is held by Yaakov, by Esau, Christianity, as we see in 25:26, when it says, after that his brother came out and his hand was held on Esau's heel, his name was Jacob. It says, Esau vayikra shamo Yaakov. Those first letters spell Yeshua. Okay, and in Judaism, we're taught that Hashem's name is likewise broken. That, we see even in Bereshit, we see the 70 letters, 70 verses down to the fall of the Nachash. We also see in those 70 verses that Hashem's name is mentioned 70 times. And we see the Yud K Vav K have been separated from the final letter Hey, just like Yud Shin Vav have been separated from the final Ayin. The entire purpose of creation is to reunite Hashem's name. And Ariel Cohen, a disciple of our Yitzhak Ginsburg, links these two together. And he says, according to Ariel's incredible teachings, even the land of Israel, Judea, Samaria, and Gaza in Hebrew, Yehuda, Shamron, Ve'azah, spells the name of Yeshua. And today, there's one part of the land that remains in the hands of the Gentiles, which is Azah, and that is the Ayin. It is time for the 70 nations to return the Ayin back to Yeshua's name. And this is what's going on all around the world, the fullness of the Gentiles. And this is what we're trying to do, bring back the Ayin. Even in the Psalms, it's floating and the Ayin is trapped. Like the sages say, that Mashiach is hidden at the gates of Rome. And we say, Bayom Yiyeh Hashem Echad Ushemo Echad. In that day, his name will be one. And so this is the secret of the Ayin and what we're doing when we're counting the Omer. And all of this is not for anything. We are doing something spiritually. We are correcting what's going on. The world is in a lot of trouble. And what we are doing is correcting ourselves and keeping that negative force away from us. We are doing tikkun. And it's the secret of the 70. Why is the 70 all everywhere in Torah. With the book of Esther, Haman and Mordecai, we drink on Purim, and we drink and we see Haman hanging on the gallows, but he's Haman is supposed to be a king, but it was meant for Mordecai. And when we drink, we get confused. The sages say we get confused. We can't tell the difference if it's Mordecai or Haman. And when we look and we think we may be mistaken and see it's Mordecai, all of a sudden we're seeing the Mashiach hanging on the tree, crowned with a robe. And Esther and Mordecai is also the initial letters for Aaron and Moshe. Esther and Mordecai, Eliyahu and Mashiach. And you see, this is the secret of the 70. The 70 is in the eye. Yeshua says, if your eye be full of darkness, it's no good. But if your eye is full of light, and it's all about the eye. Are your eyes focused on? And our eyes should be focused on Mashiach, and that is the secret of the 70.